Thank you all for joining today. Appreciate everyone who's agreed to attend the panel here. Just a quick introduction of Tenant Talks. Tenant Talks originated in Vancouver, Canada, and now has virtual events running throughout the United States, Canada, Australia, and Germany. And the purpose of Tenant Talks is an educational forum for office tenants that is also supports local charity organizations and as well as global organizations. The proceeds from live events go to charity, but since the pandemic has started, all of the virtual events are now free of charge. So a little bit, just briefly, Formcraft is a partner of Tenant Talks, and we're a design-led integrated project delivery firm. We offer workplace strategy, architecture, design, and construction management services. And our entire team is very passionate about improving the daily lives of people and helping them engage with their work. That said, I'll turn it over to LIZZY McClellan, who will moderate today's panel.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today. My name is LIZZY McClellan. I'm the Senior Editor of Business of Law at ALM. I got my start in Philadelphia, where I'm still based. Great to be having this conversation today with some of our Philadelphia leaders of the legal industry. And, you know, a little bit about, you know, what we're hearing at ALM is just the way the law firms are doing business is changing so much because of the events of the last year, and unfortunate as they have been with the pandemic. It's really caused a lot of law firms to rethink how they do business and how they use their office space and how their lawyers and staff, you know, function. So I'm excited to get started in this conversation today. You know, we have leaders from a few different law firms here that each bring a really unique and interesting perspective. So I'll let each of them introduce themselves. John, we'll start with you.
Sure. Thanks, Lizzie, and thanks, Phil. My name is John Martini. I'm the executive partner for Holland and Knight. Our Philadelphia office was opened up in 2018, and we have been dealing with these issues like everybody else over the past several months. And we're in kind of a unique position, maybe unique, probably not unique to everybody, but we are starting to look. We went into short-term lease space. We're starting to look for new space, which could be the space where we're in right now, which is Sierra Center, in a few months now. So we're going to be an early contender for kind of looking at how this new wave affects all of us.
And Stephanie.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Resnick, and I am the Philadelphia office manager. We too have been dealing with our situation, and unbelievably, we've been dealing with a very smooth transition from working remotely to working in office, which is something that we too are going to be grappling with over the next several months. But we're delighted that you know, technology is working and everyone has a great attitude, and we're getting through this.
And last but not least, Nick.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nick Centrella. I'm the managing partner of Conrad O'Brien, and we're about a 30-lawyer firm here in Philadelphia. Unlike my colleagues who have offices throughout the country and probably throughout the world, we are situated here in Philadelphia. So we only have, you know, primarily one office that we have to deal with. Like John, we are in the position where we went through our last lease in November of 2011, and that lease is now up in November of 2023, you know, which is almost 3 years away. But the reality is, for those who have gone through these type of situations, we are already thinking about obviously planning for our next lease, and have already begun the process of thinking that through in terms of office space. So we have two unique things coming up. One is the return to work, you know, when it happens for the existing office, but we're also in the very beginning of planning our next lease and potential move as well.
Thanks to all for introducing yourself. And to kick off our conversation, I'm curious to hear from each of you. Can you share one significant change that your firm has made to your processes or habits or your office design, perhaps, in response to the COVID-19 pandemic? We'll start with you, John.
Sure. Well, I think probably like everybody, we have gone primarily remote. Everybody in this panel, I should say, we have gone primarily remote, and that's been the biggest thing. But to kind of go to a different kind of element or color of the question, I think the most significant and important cultural change that we've made is really requiring people to be on camera for meetings when they're not in the office. And that's been something, there have been multiple views on that. First, I think it was not well received by everybody. But I think in the end, everybody has appreciated it because it's helped us get through this process as a cohesive unit and kind of staying together. But we do realize that in a large sense, it's temporary, although there are going to probably be permanent elements of it that continue. It's still not a full substitute for the in-person collaboration that you achieve when you're sitting in that office together.
Stephanie, any thoughts on your biggest significant change?
Sure. I think the biggest change are these video calls. Interestingly, we used to come into work and do all of our calls on a telephone, and sometimes, it would have been good to have this interaction via video. So I think the fact that video calls are really relevant now and have really changed the way in which we do business. And that's going to stick with us.
Nick, anything to add there?
No, just that, we had a fairly liberal work from home policy even before the pandemic started. Attorneys could work up to 2 days remotely before all this happened. But what I think that the pandemic did is put that in hyperdrive, such that now not only the attorneys have figured out that they could work at home pretty effectively, largely because of these type of Zoom calls, and even depositions and hearings, are being done this way. But I think the real difference or the real insight here is that even at the staff level, it can work. We never had work from home plans in place for the staff because that was viewed to be, pretty difficult to implement if attorneys are here and staff isn't. I think what the pandemic has showed is that really across all job levels, people can do it fairly efficiently from other locations. And I think that's going to be the major question from a work in the office, work at home policy as we move forward when the vaccines start working correctly.
And there's also, if I may, there's also the issue of travel. We used to travel to client meetings all over the place. And I think what Zoom calls have shown is that you really don't need to do that travel. You really do get a one-on-one interaction with these video calls. So that is going to be a forever change. There are going to be certain circumstances where we're obviously going to have to travel, but I think it's going to cut down travel immensely in the future.
It's not going to help our frequent flyer miles.
No, not at all.
I think
we're never going to get to those levels again.
To dovetail on that, I think what remains to be seen, which is really going to be interesting, is to see, especially in the practice development area, if there will be a material advantage to firms that aggressively start traveling again and start to do what they can to kind of get in the face of their prospective clients. And if that's effective, I think it's going to be kind of another race to the bottom. You could call it the bottom or the top, but another very highly competitive environment, and we'll quickly see a lot of travel return in the practice development space where I think it was before. If it's no more effective, and let's be honest, we have a lot of clients that would often prefer to see us for 20 minutes, a half an hour, and then be able to kind of shut us off. rather than have to spend 2 or 3 hours with us if we made a trip across, cross country. So it'll be really interesting to see how that plays out. And I think that's going to direct this issue of what travel becomes in the future more than anything else.
Yeah, and I was just going to add that I think clients too are realizing that they can have that connection and exactly what you said, have us for 20 minutes instead of having to take us out to lunch,
It's a really interesting kind of evolution we're seeing here, forced by some unexpected circumstances. And I'm curious, especially as we, move toward the potential for long-term changes in that way. We're also seeing, fatigue and burnout in organizations. People who, perhaps they've tired of looking at a screen all day, when they used to mix it up with in-person meetings or walking down the hall to chat with a colleague about an issue. How are you managing that in your organizations? And are you finding any ways to re-energize your people and re-energize the culture despite the current environment?
This is, I think, a huge problem. It was, I think, we identified it, kind of our leadership team identified it early on in the pandemic, as soon as we started to realize this is going to be with us for a while. I don't think that we have found a great answer to it. I haven't heard of anyone who has. I'm sure that there are better answers, out there, but we have tried to do things like have contests to engage. I think engagement is the theme. We've tried to engage at the staff level, at the associate level, at the partner level, different levels of contests, even buying lottery tickets together, social events, drinks through Zoom, that sort of thing. We've tried to do that quite a bit. The Zoom fatigue is a big issue because most of what you're trying to do to meet people is through Zoom. And so where people are just tired of it, telling them, hey, we want you to get together with us and connect more, is often kind of cutting the other direction. So there has been a point this year, and actually it was around the holidays, that we kind of made the deliberate decision that, we have all kinds of options to engage folks. But you know what? It's probably better to let them have some real time off, time away from us, time to, focus on their families without work hanging over them. And we kind of backed off on some of those social things for a period. And I think that's important too. You have to know when to try to engage and when to disengage.
What we have done is we have increased our meetings, recognizing that there is Zoom fatigue, but nevertheless, we feel that there needs to be connectivity in practice groups, in departments, in offices. We're a little different from Nick only because we have 27 offices across the country. So we're trying to consistently manage that piece of it. And I think it's working well. So there have been a number of town halls we've had by office. We've had town halls by, let's say, legal assistants, separately for associates, separately for partners, together by office. So we're trying to reach out to whatever connectivity we can. And we also have had those fun things, and we established what's called the Fox Culture Club, and we do those, fun things that are not requiring work. But it is imperative in this time to maintain connectivity with attorneys and our staff. And so we've been trying the best we can, and obviously using our video platform.
I have to ask, Stephanie, what's the most fun event that you've been to so far virtually?
Well, before everyone came on, I was saying that there was this event which I was trying to figure it out. It was this platform Remo, and we were essentially going from roundtable to roundtable, just talking about stuff not really law related. And it's so interesting how far the technology has come to allow you to be on what's a Zoom call and then to break out into little rooms and little tables and move tables. So, fun stuff.
And we've been doing this similar type of things. I mean, obviously from a work standpoint, we've encouraged everyone to have group meetings, both by case, by practice group and things like that. So everyone can stay in touch with their teams and keep the collegiality going there. From a firm-wide standpoint, we've had Zoom parties, Zoom happy hours, and we've had we have a very robust wellness program too that includes yoga sessions, professional speakers on things like mindfulness, wellness challenges. We have an app that we use that people can compete in fitness challenges that really just trying to get people out walking and doing sometimes types of exercises, mental health alerts. We had a full holiday party completely by Zoom, and to get to one of the fun things, we had actually a masked singer competition where actually members of the firm were the ones who were singing behind the mask. So I think that was a lot of fun for everybody. I could tell you I was not one of the singers, but people seem to
you had some
enjoy
brave volunteers.
Yes.
But Lizzie, one of the interesting things contest-wise that we did was a 2-minute video. Everybody submitted a 2-minute video, anything. It was slice of life during the COVID period here, and from your home office, from your home, and you basically no rules other than common decency. I have to tell you, it was pretty scary to look at those videos after all of that. The video, one of our staff members had a bowl of gummy bears that she put in front of her son. And she said, "Now don't eat any of those." And she walked away for 2 minutes. Okay. And watching him, this, we'll probably be reading about this kid in the paper as years come. But watching the contortions that this poor child went through, and she ended it after about 20 seconds. But it was hilarious. So it was interesting to see different elements of personality. So in a sense, we've got to know each other better in ways we wouldn't have otherwise.
Yeah, it is interesting what creativity we've seen come out of this, for sure. I'm curious, what do each of you think that the role of the physical office is going to be for your firms? What is it perhaps going to look like, and what might be different about a year from now, when, assuming everything goes well and a vaccine is widely available and effective, when people are getting back to, day-to-day business? How might it change?
I think it's going to change necessarily, because we are going to have to incorporate remote working into our regular, normal kind of everyday life in a much more significant way, which I think is going to be good. And I think what that's going to lead to is less space, less physical office space, more collaborative space, and those sorts of things. I think I read yesterday in the Legal about a firm that was just getting a new lease, leaving the Sierra Center and going to Mellon. And literally their square footage went from, I guess now you shouldn't quote me, you probably know better, Lizzie, but it was a significant, I think it went to half of what the pre-COVID square footage was. So that, I think, in and of itself is going to be very, very significant to see how we all maneuver through that. And I know those of us who have leases that are coming up sooner than ours are going to have to maneuver through that sooner rather than later. And it certainly seems that they are. So I do think there's going to be more collaborative workspaces, more sharing of workspaces, less space than we are used to for those of us who will come into the office over time. And I don't think there's going to be anything that is going to be radical, but certainly it's of the moment. This issue is of the moment, and I think that we're going to have to, maneuver through it.
We are hearing about firms looking to either renegotiate a lease that they're already locked into, or if now's the time to be looking at a new lease, they're doing the types of things that are done in the story you mentioned, a Philadelphia-based law firm built into that lease the option to decrease their square footage during the lease period if they need to, or decide that's the most sensible move. So kind of creating some flexibility there, not knowing what the future holds for law firm offices.
I thought it was interesting based on the reporting that this is right out of the gate, and this is a
Right.
significant firm that's literally cutting their physical space in half. That to me spoke volumes. I think that that is going to be the trend.
Our lease is up in a little less than 3 years now, and we're already having that discussion. And I could foresee, we haven't made a final decision yet, but we certainly are discussing significantly less space and probably roughly half of the existing space that we have. When you look at it, I agree exactly with Stephanie's points. The primary focus of the office in the future is going to be conference room space because even though Zoom depositions and Zoom hearings are working now, there is going to be a day when judges start calling and saying, all right, we're scheduling you for trial on Monday or whenever in the near future. And when I think you get into that type of mode where you're looking to go to trial, there are certainly advantages to in-person meetings, and there's certainly advantages to in-person depositions. So I don't think while the remote depositions are certainly here to stay, there will be a return somewhat to in-person depositions and meetings. And I think that firms will utilize their office space in order to accommodate that. What we've learned is that on the back end of the space in the internal offices, a few changes I think will happen. One is the movement towards single size offices will go even further. I think firms will realize it's not necessary to have huge partner size offices, whereas a lot of times the partners had meetings with their staff in their own offices. Instead, you utilize a lot more open space in conference rooms where people can have those meetings. And I think smaller offices and potentially even single size offices may become the norm because people realize they don't need a huge physical office in the office if they're not going to be there all the time. So I think we'll see a lot of that. The potential for hoteling of office space, we're not there yet as a firm because I think it brings its own issues in terms of whether the offices are clean, how do you store things that you want to store in the office? There are certain things that haven't been worked out yet, at least from our perspective in that style. But certainly people who don't plan to be in the office every day or most days don't need a dedicated office, have a few offices that are guest offices for those people. And people who are in more regularly can have smaller offices because they probably won't be in as every day like they were in the past.
We are in a very similar situation. Actually, our lease is up in about 1.5 years, and so we're right at the beginning of this process, probably a little late in really focusing on all of this. But we're underway, and there's really a tension here. You have the desire to kind of keep people apart because we are in a pandemic that's all about spreading germs. And a desire to, kind of cut your space down because you just don't need it because working from home works so well. I think the work from home and the smaller space is going to clearly win out. That's my take. I do think we will likely have some significant hoteling involved. And that's really, as Nick mentioned, an outgrowth of the work from home policy, which I think will have a pretty robust policy. And we're working hard on that in advance of our move, both at the firm level. We have about 1,500 lawyers in the firm. So this is being done at the firm level as well as the local office level. About 50 lawyers in Philadelphia. So there's a lot of, really a lot of fine tuning we're trying to do to try to find what that right size is, finding the right location kind of regionally, whether we're going to be, across the river where we are now and at the Sierra Center on 30th Street on that side, in Center City, Navy Yard. There's some different places now to take a look at. A lot of that depends on who's going to be working from home, who we need to be able to come into the office, who will be. So there's a lot to it, but I think the two themes that I've heard this mentioned, at least one of them consistently, collaboration. These are going to be collaboration centers. That's going to be the real focus. Coordinating that collaboration, making sure that people who are in the office and need to be together can be together on the days when others are there. And they can do it comfortably, and they can do it in a way that's efficient. That's going to be important. And the other aspect that I think is equally important is training. We know we're going to be continuing to bring on young lawyers. We want to be a great place to work. We want folks to be able to get the kind of training that gives them the careers they want and makes them marketable and happy. In order to do that, you have to be in the office with people who have experience, and you have to have a location that is conducive to that. And so weighing and balancing and working through that work from home policy, the location where you're going to be, the way the physical space looks, and not wasting space in the meantime. And I think, let's be honest, even before the pandemic, there was a lot of wasted, unused space day to day in most law firms. So this is an opportunity to try to focus down on that intelligently. So it's an interesting time. I think we're going to be thrust into it pretty quickly. It sounds like Nick is as well. I have a feeling there are going to be mistakes made, and people will continue to benefit in getting this right. But it's going to be a hard process to really get it right as things move forward with these changing trends.
So when you look at the bottom line for our firms, right, all of our firms have paid an incredible amount of money for office space this year that we, for the most part, did not use, right? So going forward, the question is how can we utilize, we didn't save much money on it. We didn't save any money on it because we didn't get any relief from our landlord. And the question is, how can you now use that to reduce costs in the future?
We've been thinking hard about this question and asking clients similar questions, and the feedback we continually get is they're losing the sense of community. That collaboration just keeps coming up as well. And then speed of decision making is being lost from face-to-face interaction, especially when it comes to special projects where you need certain people present and working at an issue or a special project of some nature that has urgency around it. The office seems to be the best place to get that done. So interesting to hear these different perspectives.
I think there's another element when you talk about speed of decision making. It's kind of interesting because I think that's kind of a yes and no. What we've found is, other than in those really intense collaborative kind of environments where you're doing face to face, and there's no substitute for that. But what we've found is that's been made up for generally by the fact that our clients and other lawyers have 24/7 access to everybody these days because they're sitting at home. Where are they going? They're always there. People feel free calling. I can tell you from my practice, clients feel free calling me at 6 in the morning. They feel free calling me at 11 at night. They know I'm never commuting. And so it's that bifurcation is not there the way it was before. And so that's great for client service. I think it's generally been a net positive for client services, and clients have liked it. But when you think about the long-term career of lawyers, if that were to continue, I didn't realize I went through a fog in September of this year I think it was mostly related to the fact that I did not have that commute, and I have a fairly long commute. No unwind time, no time when you're sitting in the car or train or whatever it is, coming in the door, you're just going from morning until very late. For young lawyers, I think that's something that's going to cause a higher burnout rate, which will be an ultimate cost to our profession if we don't address that. One way, obviously, of addressing it is having a more set schedule and folks coming into an office space aren't facing those kinds of blurring of the home and work issues.
I really feel that although all of us on this are very responsive lawyers, I think that there is a new norm in terms of being available 24/7, and the lines are blurring between work and home, where before you're talking about a commute. I have a very small commute, but still it was a break between leaving work and getting home and dealing with that. And I think what we're going to have to do is really focus on education and have a lot of dialogue with our lawyers and staff and kind of figure out a happy medium, because that is something that I don't see how we get to take back after we are so responsive and so available to clients, and we want to be. And so it's working really well. But it is something to consider what John just referenced, and I think it will affect young lawyers who are not getting the same guidance and mentoring as if they were walking down the hall. And I find myself, I miss that contact. You know, I frankly very much miss that contact with our associates, our partners, our staff. So again, I think this is all going to be working out in the future, but that was an excellent point. I think I agree with that.
I definitely want to come back to that, but first I would like to take a moment just to see from those who are with us watching today what they're thinking about the future of working from home. So we'll have a poll here that you can answer, and then we'll get to see the results here in just a minute. So there we see once again those different experiences that we were just noting. Really interesting though to see that only 4% of those of us here want to work in the office every single day. That's really interesting.
A very, very similar poll that we did at the beginning of the pandemic. The 1 to 2 days was much less, and the 2 to 4 was much greater. I think it was something like 70% thought 2 to 4 days was a good time frame. So it's interesting to see how, as this thing wears on, folks are starting to think less about working from home in the future.
I could tell you is individually pre-pandemic, I had the flexibility to work from home, and I never did. Not a single day. I can't think of a single day where I worked from home other than if I had a doctor's appointment and just worked from home afterwards. I mean, I came into the office every day because it was my preference from a work standpoint. Going forward, even when we're given the green light to go back to work, I will tell you that I will now work at least 1 or 2 days from home a week. It's become the norm. We've realized it works, and we realize we can still be very efficient and get things done from home and save the commute and things like that. But on the flip side of it, for all the reasons I think that Stephanie and John have already stated, we all, I think, should be in the office at least a couple days a week in order to reinforce the camaraderie and the learning and the training that we may be missing right now.
One of the things I had, even before the pandemic, we had started to explore where it was a work from home policy, really because of climate change. Our office, our kind of signature pro bono initiative revolves around climate change, and we wanted to do that and had a pretty lax policy pre-pandemic, and I think now that we know it works so well, doing it post-pandemic just because of that. So we'll be encouraging it, to a large degree as well.
I think we've seen through the pandemic that they continue to work well, and so they will definitely be focused upon by, management and leadership.
Once we are kind of shifting back into having more people in the office on a regular basis, whether that's 1 day a week or 5 days a week, are there any examples that you all can point to of how you're bringing staff back into the office, whether you did so over the summer or on a case-by-case basis, and any lessons learned from that, from the policies that your organization's put in place?
We had a plan, but it was never implemented because the city of Philadelphia, in our view, never really allowed office workers like our firm to return. The guidance that we understood from the governor's office and the mayor's office was that for those individuals for whom remote work was, in essence, working, you should not go back into the office. And so we never did as a firm, other than the few staff that we have come in on a regular basis. Our plan, though, and presumably will still be the plan whenever it is that the city opens back up, was to rotate in roughly a third of our existing employees, basically Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, leave Monday and Friday open for people to come in if they wanted to, but not by necessity. So in essence, the plan was for really to only have about 30% capacity at any one time and only have people come in 1 day a week. until they got reacclimated to coming back into the office. So that was our plan back last summer. If we ever did return, it didn't happen, but it presumably will also be our plan when that time comes.
And our plan is very similar to Nick's, although we were staggering people on a Monday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Thursday schedule, and just really having the core staff here. When this changes and when we are allowed to get attorneys back in the door, we are going to stagger them, and it's not going to be for 5 days a week, and it's going to be a gradual return to work over a period of time, once the governor and Philadelphia clear it.
I think that, we've, because of the way our offices are dispersed throughout the U.S. and abroad, what we've really seen is the firm kind of wrestling with a couple of different approaches that affect different cities in different ways. In cities like Philadelphia, where you have mass transit, where you have generally elevators, those kinds of things, there has been zero rush to push people to come back. It's actually been on the other side. We've been trying to hold people from coming back who want to come back. We've allowed them to come in on an emergency basis where they have to be in there for some highly collaborative event or project where there's an emergency, they need to look at a file, those kinds of things. Obviously, we have some administrative folks who are getting the mail and that kind of thing. But we also, throughout the Holland and Knight offices, we have offices that are in very garden parks, those kinds of things where there is no elevator, no mass transit. We found that a lot of those folks are going back. They want to go back. They want to be in the office. And that's something that's been really, firms almost a dichotomy. With the city offices, we have not done a lot of planning on how to bring people back yet. And I think that the big reason for that is we don't even know what the vaccine is going to mean. We don't know if after people are vaccinated, they're going to have to still wear masks. We don't know the degree to which we're going to have to kind of keep the things in place. Now, we did retrofit our office. And I'm sure that the new office that we go into will be, created in a way that is thoughtful around pandemic and germ spreading. But whether we come back in and do it in a staggered way, whether we try to make sure that we are being very focused on minimizing the spreading of infection, I'm just not sure yet. And I think we have to wait to see what these vaccines are going to mean, and hopefully they'll mean that we can go back to normal, but I don't think anybody believes that at this point.
We, same as John, we have had a pandemic task force because we've had to deal with different governmental restrictions over 27 different venues, and state by state, of course, everything varies as well. And first and foremost is the health of our lawyers and staff. And we're not going to rush this. We're going to do this in a very deliberate and careful way.
Have you put any plans in place or had any discussions around whether the firm will require or encourage vaccines once they're available to your staff and lawyers?
We've had discussions about it. We have not yet made a decision. I'll give you my personal opinion since it's we haven't discussed it as a firm yet or approved it as a firm. My personal thoughts are that we definitely should encourage it, and I would probably go so far as to require it, except for, and as I understand it from the labor and employment side of it, that we will be able to do that, provided that we give some accommodations for those who need it for whatever reason, either health-wise or religious beliefs or things like that. But I do think when you look at it from the perspective of the firm, that the risk of requiring it outweigh the risk of not requiring it, right? I mean, if someone gets a vaccine and has an allergic reaction or something like that, theoretically, they could try to place some blame on the firm by requiring it. But that's a far less risk than allowing people into the firm who are not vaccinated and potentially spreading a deadly virus. So from my perspective, I do think it's something that should be required to the extent that it's possible.
And we have been discussing that notion, and we're actually going to try and see if we can have a nurse come in and administer vaccines in-house. Obviously, it's very, very important. And again, as a personal view, not the firm view, I think it's critical to the safety of everyone. But, there are going to be people who aren't going to want to take the vaccine, and we're going to have to deal with that. And we'll, fully discuss it and come to a reasonable accommodation, I'm sure.
We are, struggling with the same kind of issues Nick, I think, correctly characterized. My personal view is we should require it, except in those cases where health or religious circumstances dictate otherwise. But it will be an interesting thing to see what the reaction is to that for firms that do require versus don't. I feel like the bigger risk as well is, as Nick stated, in not requiring it. So, but our firm needs to make that decision that covers all the offices, not just ours.
We're going to launch one more poll just to see how everyone is thinking about the impact on their office space in the future of the pandemic and the lessons that we've learned this year. All right, another interesting poll result here. We have 0% are upsizing their office, and I guess that's a bit unsurprising given the conversation that we've had so far here. But I have heard some firms saying that they're actually increasing square footage because they happen to be growing. So I think that the big question there is, all right, so what's the square footage per lawyer? What's the square footage per staff member in this space that you're growing? And that perhaps is the area where everyone can agree. And perhaps unsurprising that we see downsize and relocating or downsize and sublease a portion of existing space as popular answers here. For our panelists, have you heard from any of your peers in the market about other moves that they're making, whether that's subleasing or downsizing or renegotiating?
I think the first firms that are going to have to grapple with this, Lizzie, are the firms that are facing, lease renewals. And so I think that's evolving. And, but it seems that there could be a potential for growth, but I think the space will be used differently. That's for sure. And whether there's an actual decrease of space or increase of space, it's definitely going to be used, in my view, and again, this is just speculation, differently. Because, again, as Nick and John so aptly stated, there really is going to be a difference of people working remotely, and that's going to be an accepted form of lawyering. We're going to allow people to work remotely on a regular basis, I think, in view of what we've all experienced in the pandemic. But I do think the space will be utilized differently, even if it's not significantly reduced. But again, as I referenced earlier, the article that came about a firm that moving and literally was cutting its space in half. I don't think Fox Rothschild is going to do that, but it's evolving.
There's also the possibility now that you can build in room for some growth. Actually, if you have existing office space, but you're near capacity, the concept of hoteling and sharing of offices does allow for increased attorney size without necessarily increasing office space. So I think firms will be less likely to take space that they're not using under the theory that they will grow into it. I think firms will try to more closely match their existing size that they want and count on growth either through the use of shared office spaces or purchasing of additional space as time goes on.
Yeah, I'm getting lots of great ideas here because I think we're going to be a guinea pig and out ahead. So love to hear you guys talk about this. I think my guess is for us, we're probably going to end up cutting our overall space size by about a third. If I was guessing, maybe 25%. I think we have that much space that, given the working from home, that is going to be prevalent. And I do think we'll embrace hoteling, that we can cut by that much and still have some pretty significant growth headroom, which is something that's important to us, and we do plan on growing. I think right now we're going to have that ability. And if we were to cut by 25% to a third, and we're really smart about our work from home policy and kind of our hoteling situation, and we do allow some folks to continue to work from home almost exclusively, which I think they want to. So given all of that, and I do think it's important that you build in that ability to grow for most firms. We certainly think that there is room for growth in this industry. But it's going to be challenging to do it in an intelligent way that doesn't end up running into some significant problems, 2 years down the line, 5 years down.
An exciting prospect to be looking at a new lease when the market's going through so much transformation. Also probably a little nerve-wracking when so much is still changing to have to make those decisions. So, with the last few minutes before we get to some audience Q&A, I'd love to hit our panelists with a few rapid fire questions. So, the first thing to come to your mind, we'll try to stick to about 10 seconds per answer, just to get your thoughts on a few things related to our conversation today. What's the biggest surprise or biggest learning experience that you've had throughout the pandemic so far? We'll start with Stephanie there.
Working remotely has been seamless.
How about Nick?
Yeah, same thing. But I would just add to it that it's not that huge of a surprise that it works for attorneys, but the fact that it works for almost the entire firm is, to me, the biggest surprise.
I've been surprised that the people who want really badly, and maybe I shouldn't be surprised by this, to come in and work seem to be the people with young children.
Yeah, I would say that's been a biggest surprise here, as well as the demographic that wants to come to work. And I'm squarely in that demographic.
I can speak to experience by saying I can understand that perspective quite well. So the next question here, what's the one golden nugget piece of advice that you'd like to share about the future of office design and the office experience for your firm?
I think we've covered this before, but it's really spaces for office collaboration more so than the focus on individual offices. I think that's the biggest thing. I do think we still need individual offices. I think the concept of the open plans where everyone was always together in pods or things like that, given the infectious disease sensitivity of everyone now, I think that's less likely. I think people will still want dedicated offices, but they'll be smaller, and the focus will be more on the other spaces where we'll have clients and depositions and conference rooms.
I think the key to the future is communication, because there are going to be changes, and they have to be really vetted well. And there needs to be communication with everyone who has a stake here. So that's what I'm hoping in the future that we do. And obviously the biggest part of this, as Nick said, is collaboration. And we want everyone to feel good about where they work and why they work here, and those sorts of things. So consistent with Nick's comments, I think we just really need to communicate and collaborate about those changes that may impact how we practice in the future.
I think, kind of as a subset of Stephanie's point, really the intelligent intersection of the work from home policy and the office design and location is going to be really key going forward.
I would say that just one little nugget is make sure you're asking the right questions and finding out what does your office do best for you, and what work might even be better off being done from home than in the office. And getting those questions answered, it can go a long way.
And finally, what are you most fearful of moving into the rest of this year with regard to the working environment?
I think it's losing the common purpose that kind of holds the firm together and keeps everybody rowing in the same direction, keeps everybody understanding what their role in the organization is. I think that's incredibly important. It was hard to achieve before COVID, and it's going to be even harder after.
And I agree with John that that is, I think, the issue for all firms is keeping the glue, keeping the culture. And how do you keep a culture if you're, going to be having a number of people working remotely? And what do we do? And so we have to work harder to do that.
Yeah, I agree too. I would just add that I think one of the biggest challenges too is to incorporate new people into the firm culture, right? We've all hired both attorneys and staff since the pandemic. Most of those people have not physically met any of their work colleagues, or very few of them, except for the ones they may have interviewed with and occasionally, stopped in the office to see. So we have attorneys, who've never met one another, who've been here now for almost a year. We have staff that have never met one another, who've been here for almost a year. I think it's easy to keep the existing culture with the people who were here and observed it firsthand, but it's a little more difficult to impart it to those who are new and to train them, quite frankly, in terms of how to be a lawyer and how to be an effective employee of a law firm. So I think that's probably the biggest challenge.
For me, just that there's some kind of a hiccup with the vaccine, or it doesn't do what we all expect it to do. I think from my standpoint is one of the most fearful things for going forward.
Phil, I think, has been gathering some questions from all of you, and we'll start trying to answer those. So Phil, I'll turn it over to you.
Just a few questions have come in, and if anyone has something on their mind, feel free to submit it at this point. But we'll start with first thing that popped up here is, what were the reasons for limiting work from home before the pandemic, and how have you reevaluated those reasons?
I think one of the reasons was the unknown, and that coupled with the inherent unfairness. We didn't know what, and very few law firms, I think, knew what it would look like with staff working from home. I think most folks felt that you had to have staff in the office. The regular job functions that they perform day to day were physical. They had to be there. They wouldn't work if they were not actually in the office. And then when you kind of start to move, up the ranks to different levels in the organization, associates, are you going to let your associates all work from home and have your staff be there? And same thing with partners. I think that was inherently kind of a sticking point and a problem. Now we know it works with staff working from home. I mean, that's just as simple as it can be. It does work. There are certain things that can be better in the office, but on the whole, it works for most firms. And so there's a complete reevaluation of all of this.
I think that the concern was productivity and lack of collaboration. And it's still harder to be productive, in my view, outside of the office than it is inside of the office, and to be collaborative. I mean, just things like meeting a colleague in a hall and asking a question about a case that you have, or say, hey, have you ever come before this, or do you know this expert, or, those sorts of questions that are not scheduled questions. It's a part of living together and professionally, and it's a part of being together professionally. And I think that those are that's the reluctancy, because you lose that. You definitely lose that intimacy of practicing together.
And some of it was just a lack of knowledge, right? You have a history of people who are used to walking outside their office door or picking up the phone and having somebody run into their office immediately, or walking out and telling their staff, I need this copy and I need this done. And the fact that they now have to pick up the phone and do that, at least pre-pandemic, there would have been some opposition to it. Whereas now that they've been doing it for nearly a year, I think people are going to be more welcoming of that possibility.
But I will say real quickly that those issues are issues that firms have struggled with as they spread across different offices and as teams were encouraged to work from different offices. And I think that, you know, a lot of firms have dealt well with the collaboration issue for years. It's still not perfect, and there's still, to Stephanie, to your point, there's still a tremendous benefit, you know, both kind of socially and creatively in having people that you're running into in the hallway. But what was really new, in my view, is we had never kind of seen the staff interaction work from home before.
Well, we're bumping up against time, but if the panel has time for one more question, we'll throw it out there.
Sure.
I think we already covered a lot about hoteling and work strategies, but one other question here. Will your firms be seeking shorter term leases in the future to optimize flexibility and improve the firm's ability to adjust its space to the changes in business?
Well, certainly that would be the preference, right? But negotiations of leases are always a cost-benefit analysis. And my guess is what we'll see is different terms of leases offered, but the price per square foot is going to be different depending upon the length of the term. But I do think that on average, firms would prefer to have shorter term leases, and I think that's probably what the trend will be, hopefully.
I think that you might see some firms that think that they can get great deals now, and certainly may try to take advantage of that and get longer term deals depending upon what those deals look like. But given the choice, I think that because of the need for the uncertainty and the need for flexibility, you're going to see a lot of folks pushing for shorter term.
Thank you all very much for your time and your insights, and we look forward to seeing you again, hopefully on a future panel on some other topic.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Lizzie.
Yep, thank you, everyone.
Thanks
Thank
to all
you
of our
all.
panelists.
Okay, thanks.
Bye.